Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Engineering Leadership Live. During this discussion, we will be talking about how our engineering managers work, why our panel decided to join Facebook, and discuss autonomy, collaboration, and management. We want to make this an interactive session, so please start posting comments and questions, and we'll get to as many as we can throughout this 45-minute live. I'm your host, Zara, a sourcing lead here at Facebook. Our panel of engineering managers come from around the world, so let's meet them.
Hello, I'm Lila. I'm an engineering manager at Workplace by Facebook.
Hi, I'm Jesse. I'm also an engineering manager on Workplace.
And my name is Maria. I'm engineering manager on Ads Engineering.
Great. So how long have you been at Facebook? What were you doing before? And what made you decide to join here? Maybe if we start with you, Lila.
Yeah, so I've been at Facebook for a bit more than a year and a half. And before that, I was living and working in Sweden for 11 years with various companies. But originally, I come from Greece, so I have a bit of a diverse background, I would say, on my own. But the reason why I joined Facebook was that I was very interested in the scale of problems that this company is working on. And also, I wanted a new challenge.
Yeah, I'm Jesse. So I was working at a company for a very long time. And one of the things I was working on was integrating the latest JavaScript open source into our product. And so I was attending a React conference, and I met with a few of the Facebook engineers who presented there. And they were certainly leading industry for JavaScript. And then I had a number of friends who had left my previous company and joined Facebook, and they're all really good. And so there was some sort of back and forth about how it might be interesting to join. I looked into what was available in London. There are a few really interesting projects. So one of them that struck me was community integrity, which is basically keeping the community safe. And I thought, I use Facebook, my family uses Facebook. The opportunity to work on keeping the community safe felt really empowering. And there were other interesting things, right? Like I was at this React conference. I thought being able to work with these JavaScript experts would be amazing. And so one thing led to another, and here I am.
Cool. I've been here for a while now. It's been 4.5 years. Gosh, it flies by quickly. But before that, I've been working most of my life in London, about 2 decades. I grew up in Sydney, but was born in Prague, so I'm also complicated. International background, diverse. But I mostly work in London, mostly in startups. And 4.5 years ago, I kind of made the leap. And it's been a really fun ride since.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So what was your main concern you had about joining Facebook before you actually started the process? So maybe if we could start with you, Maria.
Sure. Actually, perfect segue from where I left it. One of the things, I was actually a little bit worried about joining a larger company. I kind of went into startups to optimize for learning. The thing which motivates me is learning new things. And kind of that's why I was always trying to work in startups, because that's where you kind of get most exposure to different kind of problems. And once I actually exited into a big company, and I swore I would never work for a big company again. But kind of after a while, you kind of get this almost like a Groundhog Day effect, where it's like everything is kind of like you're solving the same problems. And this felt like it would have a chance to learn really new skills and actually solve problems which I haven't been able to get access to before. My plan was actually, don't tell anybody, but I was kind of planning to come here for 2 to 4 years, learn some new skills, jump back into the startup land. But it's been so much fun, and the problems are so rich, and probably not the kind of problems which you will get access to anywhere else in the world, that I will be here for a lot longer.
Brilliant. And what about you, Lila?
So, as I mentioned before, I relocated from Sweden to join Facebook here in London. And one of my major concerns was how this would affect my work-life balance. Because Sweden is a country where, parenthood is very much appreciated and encouraged by giving a lot of days off to the parents and, benefits and so on. And then also Facebook is a very successful company. So I was assuming that probably we are being aggressive with our employees and so on. And another big concern that I had was that, there were 3 alternatives when it came to my interview process. One was that I succeeded and I got this great job and I was doing great and, the happy scenario. The other one was that I failed the interview and then nothing changed. Still good, I would get to learn some things in the process. But then the one that scared me the most was that I would succeed in the interview, but then fail at the job. Because I felt that, Facebook is this big company. Everyone wants to work there. Obviously, they get all these amazing people that I'm obviously not on par with their skill set. So I had this huge imposter syndrome kicking in during the process, and I was thinking of dropping out. And my recruiter at that point did something super useful for me. She invited me here for a Women in Tech meetup that was happening at the Facebook London office. And during that, I got both to meet other women working in the London tech scene, but also meet other leaders within Facebook. And I realized that, first of all, when it comes to like the work-life balance, there is the same flexibility that I had with my previous employer, so I shouldn't worry too much about that. But also when it comes to like, you know, the imposter syndrome, the people I met, they all had one head and they look like humans. So it was not like I was going to be among people that were completely different from me. I could see that I could share some of the same values and some of the same leadership skills and ideas. So I felt more comfortable to go through the process. And well, here I am still. So obviously I probably did a good thing.
Absolutely.
And you didn't just come to the event, you actually came and gave a talk and you totally crushed it. I remember it was awesome.
Yeah, that's when we first met. That was great. Thank you.
Awesome. And obviously once you joined, how did it actually compare with the reality and expectations? What were the kind of, you know, big surprises? If I could start with you, Jesse.
Sure, yeah. Let's see. I'd say there were a few big surprises. So the first one, I think, was just the transparency. Like, when I joined, I immediately was a member of Workplace, and therefore I was able to see sort of things that Mark Zuckerberg had posted for years before and things that he was posting that week, and that the VP of Messenger was posting that week. So I immediately could see sort of what was happening across the company, which was really cool. So like my previous role, I didn't really see what was happening outside of my organization, and it just feels so connected. And it really surprised me dramatically. The second thing is the tech. Like, it blew me away. In order to get this machine to ship, it's like heroics magic, you know, in a way. And it sort of blows my mind still that like we're able to do what we do, but there are amazing people working on it. And so it's like incredibly complex. It enables us to do it. But on the other hand, it's also like so simple that within the first week or two, I had shipped code to production, and could understand code and could sort of make reason about what things were doing. So it's like both incredibly complex and crazy, yet also like simple enough to work with, which I thought was definitely a surprise to me. And then I think the third was just the culture, like the focus on culture. Like in day one, we have a long session on culture. You see culture all across the walls. Like, I think that a lot of companies pay lip service to culture and they talk about like, here are our values, but seriously, like every meeting I was in, we would talk about like, oh, you know, be open, or, you know, focus on impact. And you just really feel it and talk about it. And it's like, yeah, I think people say like, oh, you drank the Kool-Aid, but it's like you really like get into the like, I believe in this thing and the people around me do, much more so than other places I've been.
Great. And has that been a similar thing for you, Leela?
Yeah, definitely. I think one more thing that surprised me was how well things were working with so little top-down process. So 2 jobs ago, I was part of a company that was working in this, you know, waterfall kind of model. And we went through an agile transformation and things improved dramatically. So then I became kind of like an agile monk. And I thought that, you know, you need this in every single company. Otherwise, yeah, you cannot deliver. And then I joined this place here and I saw that people were not talking about Scrum or Kanban. Like they were not bringing up like these hype words at all. And the processes within the teams differed so much, but we could still deliver with the same speed and efficiency. So I tried to understand what was it that was making this company successful in that sense. And I think it was the fact that we were not establishing processes, we were living the processes, or maybe rather the ideas behind the processes. So Agile is all about, you know, continuous feedback cycles and fast iterations, which is something that we have here by default since we have continuous delivery and shipping our features like practically every moment of every day to our users. But at the same time, it's also about like extreme ownership of the problem area. And this is something that we encourage very much here at Facebook. So as Jesse mentioned, it's like an important part of the culture. We have we have posters on every walls of our offices saying that, you know, this is your company now and nothing at Facebook, it's somebody else's else's problem and so on. And this is something that we actually believe in. Like even our performance evaluation framework encourages this kind of behavior so that every single individual in the company feels empowered to act and to take the right decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jesse, if you could tell me a bit about your team and how does it differ from teams that you've led before?
Sure. So I manage a few teams in Workplace. We're working on sort of user-facing features and use cases. And I think the challenges probably differ, day to day or month to month, and certainly half to half. So like the challenges and in fact, team to team, right? So like one team, I have some incredibly challenging technical problems where I'm working with people across the company, and there's a lot of sort of collaboration in terms of how are you going to build that thing that we rely on. Another team, I have some interesting scalability problems where it's like we want to deploy hundreds of thousands of people in the company, and how do we actually make that work in a timely way? And then there are also interesting product questions. So how do we build the best experience for something that doesn't necessarily fit today? The other thing I think that has been really different for me between Facebook, my current teams, and previous experiences is the closeness both with XFN. So we have a bunch of roles in Facebook, whereas in my previous life, there was sort of product and engineering and potentially QA, and that was sort of it. Here we have product marketing manager and data and all these different roles, and then also opportunities to really interact with customers a lot. So I was at a customer event just last week in New York, and people talk about how it's changed their life and how communicating at work is just dramatically different than before they had Workplace, and they've had more collaboration in the last month since they've adopted Workplace than they had years before. So I think in previous roles I haven't always had sort of the same opportunity to interact with so many people, but yeah, it really changes moment to moment.
Brilliant. And to everyone watching, please feel free to ask questions on the poll that we have posted. And actually we received a question already yesterday, which is how do you keep your teams motivated? So who wants to go for that one?
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of ways we keep our teams motivated. In my previous jobs, I often focus, so this is kind of the autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And the autonomy and mastery are often ones which I found easy to do in other engineering teams. We kind of focus on people's learning crafts and try to give them an environment where they're able to make decisions as much as possible. There's also all and that's very easy to do here as well. Kind of Leila already touched on how much autonomy we have. And there's all the other hygiene factors, making sure people get recognized, making sure people have the resources they need. One thing which has become a really powerful lever here, though, for me, which I didn't experience so much before, is because as engineering, you are effectively the business. You are building the products that is the core of Facebook, which gives you kind of unique strength of voice, and you're actually able to articulate really strongly what mission is your team striving to and trying to accomplish. And that gives you really, people get really passionate about that in a way which I have not been able to kind of articulate before. When somebody else is making the decision and you kind of just doing the implementation. And the other thing which kind of, as an engineering manager, gets you to tell this story really well, is that we have a ridiculous amount of internal mobility. So I can, for example, decide tomorrow, hey, I'm not actually, this doesn't resonate with me anymore. I will go to a different team. That is also true for every engineer in my team, every manager in my team. And you actually have to get really good at explaining the purpose. And that's one of the things which has made me a better manager today than I was when I joined Facebook.
Great. And actually that leads on really well to our next question, which is, what do you see your role is as an engineering manager? So maybe if I could go to you, Leila, for this one.
Yeah. So I would say that, like Jesse said before, it changes by the day or by the moment even. But the common denominator is that I'm the person that removes roadblocks from my team. So depending on what the team needs right now, I will change my role and shape it accordingly. So there was a time when we didn't have a product manager in the team, and therefore I had to wear that hat for a while. But normally, like there are some basic things that every manager does, like pretty much in every company, which is about helping people grow, empowering them to take on new opportunities. Then it's also discussions about strategic vision of the product and so on. So the engineering manager is usually involved in that as well. I know that there are managers within the company that actually want to continue to have contributions like in the code base. This is not something I choose to do because I feel, there are other things where I can have more impact. But the options are like limitless, I would say, as long as you can support your team achieve their goals, like you can shape your role according to what you feel is best.
And has that been similar for you, Maria?
Absolutely. In some ways, I often only half joke that the role of an EM in a group is effectively to be a CTO or CEO of that group, depending on what the group needs. You get a chance to work with ridiculous number of functions. I think in our group, there's 11 functions represented at the moment, which is fascinating and kind of gets you. Effectively, you are running your own business at a scale. For example, we don't do this massive planning of like project and timelines. Typically, each team makes a commitment via a goal. The goal is typically a business goal. We really try to avoid ship goals, such as we will ship this product on this date. We're much more likely to do, we are going to drive this business outcome, and it's kind of up to each of the team to decide how we're going to get there and reprioritize accordingly during the half, which kind of gives this agility and autonomy, which is built into the fabric of the company, which enables the engineering to succeed in a way where it can't in places where I worked before.
Great. And what does a typical day look like for you then, say, Jesse?
I guess just adding on, right, it certainly differs day to day. I guess I'll answer that thinking about like my last 2 weeks. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Menlo Park, which is the, HQ, meeting with a bunch of teams. I had some people on my team go with me, and we were sort of driving on like, how are we going to build this next thing? So a ton of meetings with people in Menlo Park and drawing sort of designs and coming up with technical solutions. Then the beginning of the next week, I was at this customer event. And so all day meeting with customers, talking through like what their experiences are. There were sessions, did a Q&A. Right now we're going through H2 planning. So basically we're coming up with what are the teams going to be, what are sort of their big goals, coming up with what are the metrics that we're aiming to hit, how will we staff those things. Obviously on top of all of the sort of like one-on-ones that you would normally do. I also, Lila was saying like, she doesn't do coding. I still tend to try to like push that into my day. So, I will put in time to look at diff reviews during the day. So it really depends, but I guess that's what my day's been like the past couple of weeks anyway.
Awesome. And thank you. We have our first audience question. So what was it like starting at Facebook, and do managers go to boot camp? That is from Dan in London.
I can take that. Yeah, so managers do go to boot camp. I had a friend who was a Facebook employee who told me boot camp will be the best 2 months of your career. I loved it. In some ways, I was like, how do I stay in this longer? So you do the normal engineering boot camp, which means that you get to work on tasks and figure out how teams work. Some managers are hard allocated, which means they know exactly which team they're going to join. Other managers are not hard allocated. I was in that second track, so I wasn't sure exactly which team I would join. So I worked on different things, which everybody does. But yeah, you sort of take the classes that every engineer who's joining goes through, and you do boot camp tasks. For me, it was like both incredibly exciting and empowering. Like, it's crazy. I fixed a Messenger iOS bug, and I had never coded in iOS before. Like, it was super fun for me, super exciting. Like it's sort of like playing for a couple months and learning what the culture is like, learning what the code base is like.
Cool, great. And I'd say one of the things that I often have to battle when speaking with people is that they're concerned about coming to a company the size of Facebook and how they can actually have impact. So similar to what kind of you were talking about earlier, Maria. So what would you say to that?
Wow, That's a great question. Before I came to Facebook, I was a director of engineering. I was running a group of teams, about 50 people or so. I went through bootcamp also unallocated. I was thinking of whether I should pick a team beforehand, but I decided like, hey, actually, let's wait until I get there. It was the best decision I'd made. Beforehand, I spoke to a bunch of people. It's like, this sounds interesting. And then when I came in and actually ended up picking teams, I actually ended up picking, like my shortlist ended up being completely different. And the bootcamp process actually really helps you figure out what the teams are about, meet the people, actually work on the systems, and actually figure out what really gets you going, what gets you fired up and passionate. And I could have picked a fairly large team, but actually ended up picking a team which had like 3 engineers on it. Because of the mission that we were setting up, specifically in integrity space and like keeping basically people from bad things. And that was really empowering. And one of the things I realized is actually you don't need crazy number of people to do really amazing high leverage things. If you have a fabric, I think you talked about this incredible layer of complexity. We have fabric of layers and layers where you can build things which are incredibly powerful with far less effort than I have seen before. Like the way we have structured the technology stack, it just completely blew my mind, and it's life-changing on how much more you can achieve. So I went to a team of 3, and one of the things recently I've seen one of our design VPs go from a team of like 500 to like team of 30, and people kind of make this kind of crazy move to follow what they are the most passionate about. Where in other companies they would be like, oh, you can't do that. That's like a career no. Here I've kind of gone up. I've gone down. It's been an awesome journey.
Brilliant, thank you. And sometimes we have candidates who question why we have such a flat structure here or struggle with job titles like manager. How do you kind of think about this? Maybe if we could go to Lila to start with.
Yeah. So I think this comes back to what I was talking about before, about the scale of the problems that we're dealing with here. So I think that when you're working to create products that are impacting the lives of billions of people, the number of the engineers that you have in your team or the title that you have doesn't really matter that much. It's the actual impact you have on the world. At the same time, these problems are complex, and you are working with some really brilliant people, some of the most passionate and motivated people in the world to make this successful. So you're learning so much, and it's like such a journey that like I've never thought about the title, to be honest. When it comes to the flat structure of the organization, I believe we need it to be successful, because if we don't allow the people that are closest to the problem to be decision makers, then we're bound to make the wrong decisions.
Absolutely. And some of our applicants also get concerned when we tell them there's a coding test. As managers, you're not obviously always hands-on anymore. So what was your experience in that? And maybe if we could go to Jesse for this one.
Sure. So as I said, I still code. Certainly not all managers do. I do think that as a manager of people who are coding, I think it's important for you to be able to sort of have good conversations about give feedback, give advice potentially, certainly be able to like review and have good conversations about how somebody's doing. I also feel like it's a good way to be sort of a part of the team. Like I think when I have found opportunities to like build things with people, the team sees you not as like their manager, but like as one of them, which I think has worked really well in terms of like building empathy, understanding which parts of the code base are hard or painful. Just showing that you are like willing to be a part of the team. So I don't think that every manager is going to code, but I do think that like being able to sort of ascertain and have discussions and like be a part of the team in the technical details is important. And so I think that that's probably why it's such a part of the interview process. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
I was actually so I've gone between IC and manager a few times, but before I came to Facebook, I was manager like like full-on manager, kind of very divorced from the technical detail for about 3 years. So by the time the Facebook interview came around, I could barely remember how to write any code. I did listen to my recruiter and actually did some warm-ups, and that was enough to get me through. What we're looking for is looking how good you were originally and making sure that you actually have written some code in your life, because that is very important for the empathy with the engineers, as Jesse said.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Maybe I can also share like a story.
Please.
So as I said, I don't normally write code in my day-to-day work, but we do have this thing called the hackathon here, which is like a full day of coding that happens every like 3-4 months. And during that time, I, as a manager, I free my schedule and I participate in that, because I think like it's a great way to foster innovation in the company and build these things that you might have wanted to build for a while now, but you never get the time to, and so on. So when I had first started, I had been in the company for almost 2 months. I had just been through boot camp and joined a new team with one of the engineers being very, very senior. And honestly, I was a bit intimidated, like, new company, new country, new people, and this super senior engineer that knew everything that I didn't know. And he was my peer in the team. So I decided I wanted to participate in the hackathon, and then I asked the people in the team, like, does someone want to code with me? But they had already formed like their small groups there, and the only one left was that very senior engineer. So that was pretty scary, but actually we ended up hacking together, and we created a prototype of a product that has been shipped now externally after many months of iterations and so on. But on that first day, I was sitting there hacking with him. And at some point, I realized that I had shipped something to production that had broken commenting for Facebook for 2.5 billion people. Oh, wow. It only was out there for like a few minutes, but still, I was so shocked. And I felt like at that point that it's a good thing that I did this interview preparation. Because at least I know how to fix it. And of course, like, that senior engineer was actually super helpful and, a great person. He did not yell at me. But it was like an amazing experience to be able to both actually have this impact, although it was negative, to 2.5 billion people, but also to be able to know how to fix it and, to build this relationship with this senior engineer, because, we were in it together and we managed to get through it together. So after that, actually, our collaboration was really smooth and productive.
Did you do anything like that ever again?
I've never broken Facebook again.
Brilliant.
Though I try every hackathon.
Well,
However, we do break Facebook occasionally, and one of the things I really love is, like, one of our values is be bold. And I remember when I first went to my manager saying, like, hey, I broke Facebook a bit, like hundreds of thousands people big, which is a lot more than most of customer bases before, companies before. He just went like, okay, what did you do about it? How did you fix it? Okay, congratulations, you're now a Facebook engineer. So I think everybody has to kind of have that rite of passage once.
Absolutely. And actually, thank you for another audience question. So Piotr asks, how do you as managers view and encourage diversity of thought among your teams?
Maybe I can take that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at Facebook, as we all mentioned before, culture is a very important part. And we have like these posters around the walls in our offices. And one of the ones that I love the most is bring your authentic self to work. So this is like a value that we really foster as a company and we really embrace. We encourage people to be themselves because we do believe that, having a diverse set of perspectives can help us build the best product. We have to be representative of our user base if we want to be successful. We have many different ways of improving the diversity of our employees. Like we do community reach outs. We try to help people from underrepresented backgrounds to be successful early on in their careers. Like, for example, we might go out to high schools and try to educate people to do one-to-one mentorship sessions so that they feel empowered to then come into an interview process with a company like Facebook. But even when it comes to within our internal community, in order to be inclusive and to encourage people to speak up and share their ideas and opinions, we have a lot of initiatives. Like, for example, we have this course that we call Be the Ally. And it's about educating people how to be supportive for each other and, helping everyone feel that they can speak here within the company. And it's not like a course that it's aimed to white males of a certain age to take. It's for everyone, because all of us can be allies at some point in our, not our career, in our day. Like, we all have opportunities.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. And how has your career developed in your time at Facebook? So what kind of challenges have you had?
Yeah, so I can say that I started managing one team when I first joined here, and now I'm managing several teams. I started from managing ICs, and now I'm managing managers and ICs. IC standing for individual contributors. I try not to use the lingo, but it's hard sometimes. I would say that the challenges that I face were the typical ones that you face when you're growing in that sense in your role as a manager. Like, you know, how do you go from supporting individual contributors to supporting managers? How do you manage to pull yourself out from the day-to-day, but also continue being supportive for your team and so on? What was different here was that I had very good support from my manager, but also from the people around me. Like, we have a very good collaboration in our management group within my organization, and I could always turn to people and, you know, ask for help. Another thing that was super helpful was that we embrace failure. So I knew that if I failed, it wouldn't be like, you know, you're fired. It would be more, what did you learn? So that made me feel safe to fail.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what are some of the key things you look for in a manager that show they could be successful at Facebook when you're meeting people? So maybe if we could start with you, Jesse.
Yeah, let's see. I would say that a good manager unblocks their people for sure. So they're able to, and I think that means a bunch of different things, right? Like, I think that there are things that slow the team down, and a good manager sort of recognizes that and can prevent that. I think that it means like getting the support that the team needs in whatever way that might mean. Sometimes it might mean like blocking something from up above, which like might not be applicable. So I think that there's that, like letting the team sort of do its best work. I also think a good manager has like strong degree of empathy and care. Like, I think ideally the manager like really cares for the person as a person, right? And like wants what's best for them and wants them to be able to like do their best work and bring themselves to work as their best. Let's see. I would say that good managers tend to be really, I think at Facebook anyway, tend to be proactive. Like, because it's so bottoms up, there's a lot of, like, nobody's going to hold your hand, right? Like, you certainly have support, but I think that good managers at Facebook are able to sort of make decisions, are able to, like, figure out and help the team figure out where they should be going. So, yeah, I guess I'd start with those. Which things would you add on?
Totally. They kind of... The showing care, like there's a whole bunch of behaviors around people. A lot of those behaviors are very situational. In my previous gigs, like if I had like if I think like one of my engineers, there would probably be a star in any one of my engineers. There would be a star in any of my previous teams, and suddenly you kind of find yourself in this job where you like, instead of having like a high school athletics team, you're suddenly managing Olympic team of software Olympic athletes of software engineering, and like how do you coach people who are like way better than I would have ever been, and help them actually grow and succeed, and people who are like wanting to grow, and like there's hardly any like a lot of previous jobs, like you kind of have to do a lot of pushing. Here you have to push. He's like, hey, this is how you run, and I just go for it, and like helping people there. That is exciting. So the big part of the job is definitely people skills, and that's probably going to be 50 to 60% of the job. But we do look for people who have kind of almost impossible to get blend of people skills, but we also want like a bunch of product skills. Like you own the outcomes of your team, your business. So you actually need to think about what the product is. Sure, you're going to be working with a product manager as well, probably, maybe, not everybody does. But you need to think about it and think about the business strategy. And finally, you probably need to know a bunch of engineering skills as well. You are actually working with these superstar engineers. You need to be able to have conversations in their language.
Yeah, I agree with what you both stated. I wouldn't say I have too much to add. I think empathy is like something that is definitely very important, and we're looking for every manager that we're trying to hire. And I think what Jesse also touched upon, like this sense of not being afraid of accountability, because the place is bottom up. And just as we expect from the engineers to be making decisions and feel empowered, we expect that from the managers as well. So one would need to actually be able to make decisions, potentially even on the spot and without having full context, but not being afraid to fail and actually, going for it.
Absolutely. And yeah, another audience question. Thank you very much. So we've got Saraj Dwadi asking, what are the phases of interviews to be hired into Facebook as an engineering manager?
Can I take it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So typically, you will initially speak to one of our awesome sources, which Zara knows all about. They will kind of do through the basics of our career, and based on that, we will then recommendation to meet with the engineering manager. There may be one or two typically, and this kind of exploratory chat typically covering some of the systems that you worked on, what kind of people management experience you have. If that goes well, then we bring you on site, which is a long day, 6 interviews. There'll be somebody else in the middle of that. There'll also be somebody who will take you to lunch. You get to experience what our catering is like. You will eat exactly the same place as everybody else does. It's a long day, but a lot of people actually tell me, like, when I speak to them at the end of the day, it's like, it was a long day, but I've learned a lot as well. So even if it doesn't work out, a lot of people kind of walk with a lot from the experience as well. So 6 interviews and then decision.
Great. And on that, what would be your tips for preparing for this process?
So I can start. I would say that if you haven't written code in a while, please do that. Like what I did before coming for the interview was that I just went into HackerRank, which is a website out there for competitive programming, and they have a section that is about interviews, and I just started solving problems there. Honestly, it was so much fun that I continued after I finished with the interviews, because, as a manager, normally it takes a while to get feedback, and even if you do something well, you won't hear about it for a while, whereas by solving this exercise, every evening I got some positive reinforcement, so it felt good. And then I would say also try to look back into your experiences and try to think of hard situations you might have faced as a leader, and have these examples on top of your mind so that you can actually answer them when we ask you questions about that. And I don't know what you...
I'll add one other thing. I think, like, our job as interviewers is not to, like, stump the person, like, our job is to sort of see what are your skills. And so the recruiter will be very upfront about, like, these are the types of questions that you'll get. This is what this interview will be like. And so, it's not like it's some black magic box. It's really like a well understood, well documented, like, open sort of process. And so, yeah, my advice would just be, like, you'll know the types of questions you're going to get. We would just want to see, like, are you able to deal with these things? How would you be a fit here? And so it doesn't take anything crazy. It does take some time and some commitment and some preparation, but, like, it's very clear on what you should be preparing for.
Absolutely, your recruiter is your ally in this space. They want you to succeed. They are rooting for you. They will give you a ton of advice for preparing. I did what my recruiter told me to do, and it worked out. Occasionally you still see a bunch of people who clearly haven't taken the advice, which is kind of sad because they're missing out on the opportunity to really shine. The interviewer's job is absolutely to help you shine on the day as well. So they will be they will also be cheering and rooting for you. So just do the prep that the recruiter asks you, and you'll be fine.
Great. And another question from the audience. This is from Niall this time. So, is there much collaboration between the different teams and orgs at Facebook? And if so, what does that look like?
I didn't catch the question.
Is there much collaboration between the different teams and the orgs at Facebook? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, there's an incredible amount. Like, the amount of sort of shared tech, like, you can move from one team to another and, you will sort of know how to work in that code base probably on day one. Not necessarily every team, but there's an incredible amount of collaboration, both product and technical. As an example, one of my teams works on workplace chat, which borrows a lot of infrastructure and code from Messenger. And so, there are many Messenger teams, and we have meetings and sort of collaborate with them very, very closely. And then, of course, like WorkChat has integration with Workplace, and so we're also having sort of a lot of collaboration between Workplace teams and the Workplace messaging team. So, I think sort of to what Maria was saying earlier, like if you don't have to have that many people to build something that's freaking amazing because we are so collaborative.
Yeah, I also have an example to share that is relevant. So my team last half was working on improving performance for our Workplace mobile apps. And I knew that this is a problem that a lot of the other products of the Facebook family of apps have already worked on. So I wanted to gather that knowledge somehow. So I made a post in one of the managers groups that we have within Workplace. And I asked a question like, please help me out. And on the next day, I had already 5 meetings with leaders from different teams across the company, from different locations, where they were very happy to share knowledge and help me get started in this journey.
Wow, that's great. Brilliant. And then if you wanted to convince someone to move to Facebook as an engineering manager, what would be your elevator pitch? Maybe we'll go to Maria to start with? Or not? No? Let's go to Jesse.
Yeah, let's see. So I personally love the problems you can solve here. Like, I think that there are very, very, very few, probably zero, like very, very few companies where you can solve this breadth of like incredibly interesting, challenging, impactful, motivating things. You work with unbelievably talented people. It's such a great culture. Like, people genuinely care. We're trying to make the world better. It's like, I don't know. I think if you meet with somebody who works at Facebook, they will pitch it to you, because it's like it's hard to imagine a better opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me as well, it's like, I completely agree with everything you said. I feel that, you have people years, you have dog years, you have Facebook years. So the amount of learning that I have had in this time that I've been in Facebook is like pretty much the same as if I accumulated all the rest of the years of my career. So it's an amazing learning opportunity.
Brilliant. Great.
Totally. And you also get to work with amazing engineers. One of the, totally back up the people and problems. That's like totally there. One of the things which also has made me a better leader is you get to work with engineers who will actually be very willing to give you very direct feedback, especially if you ask them. So for the first 6 months, I was like, wow, why hasn't somebody told me? I've worked for 20 years and people haven't told me this. And suddenly, you get to suddenly all kinds of blind spots suddenly start to disappear because you understand them. That is awesome.
Great, brilliant. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our live stream session. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed meeting our panel and the discussion about working at Facebook. And also thank you to Leela, Jesse and Maria for sharing your experiences. We are hiring, so please check out our Facebook career site at facebook.com/careers. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.